Hello everybody and welcome back to the Indoor Farmer. I am your host once again, Waylon Maccabee. And this week's episode, I want to show you guys a little bit of a little further insight into some of the things that I want to do in the future and how that connects to what I'm doing right now. And I'm really excited about this episode because this is something more about me learning to do it myself, a DIY, or actually not so much of that, but repurposing objects and items and materials. And this day and age, I think repurposing and reusing and recycling is very important. I know that there is a lot of different things that people are doing and new inventions and new technologies that are coming out. So I want to incorporate anything and everything that I can find when it comes to repurposing any waste products or any byproducts. So get right into it here. As you saw before, my first episode, this shows you just the little home setup that I have, 10-gallon fish tank. And it's, as you can see behind me, it's still going strong, producing plenty of lettuce. It's very nice. I eat the lettuce on whatever I want. It's nice to have, but you know, it's just lettuce, and that tank isn't going to get very much, you know, produce out of anything else. I could do maybe some other types of leafy greens, and I have tried to do that, and the lettuce seems to grow so fast that it just takes up all the nutrients that the fish can provide. So I'm going to have to try it again without lettuce at all, and you'll see a little more about that next week's episode. But right now, let's just talk about a little bit more about the recycling. So I told you last week that I am a veteran, and one of the things that I had the biggest problem with, I mean, as you can probably tell from some of my videos, I still have all my arms and legs, and I thank God I have all my fingers and toes. The main thing that I had issues with is that I had a loss of my sense of worth, my self-worth. Like I was just a tool that was thrown away, or a discarded, anything, item that you don't need. And I just didn't have a self-worth anymore, or at least a sense of what I could do or what I could provide to the world after I got home from overseas. And I had this sort of a feeling of, they call it survivor's guilt. So I had a lot of issues with that, and now I still have PTSD, and I have thoughts of what can I make myself worth? What can I do with my life? And that's one reason why I look at things and I think, well, what purpose can that serve? What can I reuse this item for, or that item for? And I think that's a big part of my business plan. Yes, I want to farm and I want to grow food, but I want to also find ways that I can reuse materials and anything, byproducts, any waste products, and find ways to reuse those. And surprisingly, a lot of things have secondary, maybe even third uses out of them. So that's going to be very interesting as I go along here. And what you're looking at right here is one of these things. I have a neighbor and a couple neighbors actually that I've gotten random materials from because they were throwing them away. And they had this white trough here, which I think it's a nice little outdoor planter, I think is probably what it was. And I thought, well, you know what I could make? I can make that into a grow bed that's very similar to the type of grow bed that's in my little 10-gallon setup. And I thought I could do basically just mimic or just copy what I saw with this setup that I purchased and the system that I purchased. So I thought, okay, I can maybe just recreate what's going on, but on a bigger scale. And that began this process. I've actually been working on this for several months off and on, whenever I get time or materials or a new idea of how to go forward. And you'll see here what kind of progress I've made. I'm happy about it because it's going to be a big expansion to what I'm doing. What I can do here, but on a much larger scale. I mean, it's not an enormously large scale because it's only a 55-gallon fish tank that I'm using, that you saw there, and so it's a lot bigger than a 10-gallon, but not amazing. Not like the church from last week's episode, which is actually coming along nicely. So what you see here is my friend Ed. He's a great guy. He's been helping me out with tools and kind of sort of handyman thoughts on, hey, how can you get around this problem or that issue. And as you can see, we took out this center piece. I thought that the wood is very solid, so I thought it can all support itself, no problem. So take out the centerpiece, that way I can have a bigger, open, clean grow bed. And what we did in the middle there was already like a knot, kind of a big hole in the wood already. So we thought I can use that as one of the holes that I need to dig anyway. So we did this and got it ready. Let's see, keep going here. Drilling these holes actually were much more difficult than I thought. It was a very solid piece of wood. You can see my dog here, Duke. He's looking very concerned. I can tell he's very worried about like OSHA regulations and safety guidelines. He was insistent that we wore hats, but we didn't have any, so I had to tell him to chill. Okay, so I sanded these pieces down and then I painted them. Obviously, I painted with an industrial grade paint that Eddie let me borrow. Thanks again, Ed. And like I said, I drilled 3 holes in this so that it was somewhat easily able to drain water so that it wasn't going to overflow. And you'll see why later. But as you can see, this is my basement. So you have these are like buckets basically that came from I had a cat that these are cat litter buckets, so they're just a way to reuse one of those items, and they're like 5-gallon buckets basically. And in the back here I have a bunch of other materials like old bins and just random plastic containers that at some point I want to create something out of. I want to make it you can paint plastic and make it look nice, build like a little grow tower or any sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff out there, I'm sure, on Pinterest and on Google that you can look at. I'm going to try some of that stuff. So here I lined the trough with plastic, which later on it turns out that this was actually a much better idea than I thought. I ended up having to take it out. So I put the plastic in there, and then when I trimmed around the edges, I trimmed too deep on one side, and so the water was able to get between the plastic, and that's not my only issue. Let's see, this is not good. Oh, here we go. This will show you something. I decided to cut a stencil, and I just randomly cut it right here on this piece of, it's a piece of a brown paper bag. And I randomly cut it here, and then I found out that it was almost perfect distance in order to use the edge here as your guide to where the next hole should go. So I just sort of did that by accident, but it was nice. And the holes aren't perfectly straight. You can see they're off a little bit, but that's not going to really matter too much in the long run. And the holes didn't have to be perfect either. They were actually very difficult to cut. You didn't want to try not to bend or break the blade. There's Eddie helping me cut the holes. And let's see, okay. This is interesting here because I decided to take out the plastic because it was leaking through anyway. And it was leaking through, and I'll show you where. It was leaking through right here around these PVC holes. And because they were actually only sealed in with plumber's putty, which plumber's putty, it doesn't actually stay sealed when it's all wet. I mean, it depends on the situation. It doesn't stick well when it's going to a plastic liner. So I thought, okay, I'll just do the plumber's putty by itself. And that's what you see here. And I ended up doing that on both sides and around anywhere that it looked like it could leak. And that actually was not successful. I actually ended up having to take that all back out. And here's a good picture to show you the holes all cut in the PVC pipe back there. But anyway, so I had to take all the plumber's putty back out. And what I ended up trying was silicone. I know I have some pictures of that somewhere. Yeah, so I siliconed everything. I started siliconing every crack I could see, thinking that the water was getting through the wood because it was still leaking. It kept leaking, even though I felt like I had everything I could find. Yeah, right here. There you go. Everywhere I could see that might leak. And so then it was still leaking through. I don't know how. It wasn't any specific place. It sort of like seeped through somehow all the way through to the edges, and I couldn't track it down. So I ended up relining it like this, and I found something called goop that a friend of mine, Rob, was telling me about, and it actually ended up working. It did the trick. You'll see here where I tried the silicone, and that didn't work, so then I used goop around this on each one, and I doubled up the plastic this time, so it's a lot thicker. And then I poured all the clay pebbles back in, or this is like the dirt. Yeah, I had to learn how to keep the door open. And so yeah, after I tested it with water, kept having to test it with water because it kept finding different ways to leak. And even still, even though I did all this, I still ended up finding a leak even now, but I found a way around it, so it actually isn't going to hurt anything. Let's just skip ahead a little bit. So I wanted to make sure it was all nice and even, and fill up as much as you can in there. Gross. These little buggers want to jump out so much because you're trying to keep it full. I wouldn't say, packed all the way full, but full enough, and they still want to just bounce out. So you have to be careful when you're putting, grow cups into the clay pebbles. All right, yes, good job, Waylon. You can dump buckets of pebbles. This is not an endorsement of the said product. So I did spend some money on this system. I bought the clay pebbles, and the PVCs I got from my neighbor. I did have to buy some connector parts, the corners there, and some parts on the other end that would connect the hose from the pump to the PVC. So I did spend a few $100s on this system. I bought the two ladders that this is being used between, the two ladders that are suspending the entire system. It's actually interesting. It's only being held together by four screws total, but the weight of everything and the way it's connected, that way I can tear the whole thing apart when I go to move, or if I find a house to purchase sometime in the near future, hopefully, then I can take it apart and reassemble it at the other end. I didn't want to slow myself down from progress, so I thought, well, as long as I make it in such a way that I can take it back apart. And that's why the church is such a godsend, because it allows me to work on something even bigger without worrying about going up in this little space I have, or at a home that I don't own, and building some contraption that I have to take apart at some point. So anyway, it makes sense that I can take it back apart, and I'm probably going to keep this for a long time. It's not a bad setup. It fits in almost any room. I can probably still use this in my home, even though I have a bigger farm someday in a Morton building or a big steel building. Okay, so we got it filled up here. So yeah, always want to find ways to recycle and reuse. A lot of this isn't all recycled material, but I did use a lot of wood underneath of the trough. The trough is recycled. Bits and pieces of the PVC, the big pieces, are recycled. The PVC is just being held up by some, I think they call this plumber's tape. This metal banding that you can buy that's got holes in it, and it's just screwed into the plastic of this ladder here. See, Duke is very concerned again. He's a very concerned dog. Very, very good boy. So yeah, I had to trim it up, and this time I did a little better job of trimming. Just think about it. I mean, half of the difficulty of what I'm doing here is learning the handyman side of it, or the construction side of it, on what materials work together, what materials are safe to use, as far as because this is going to grow food eventually. So learning all of that is actually the hard part about recycling and reusing materials. I mean, I thought, oh, it would be easy just to slap things together and find ways to build a mousetrap, kind of contraption. But it's actually a little harder than I thought. And reusing materials doesn't always save you money in the long run. So those are things I'm going to have to think about in the future. But I still think that there are going to be reasons to get recycled materials and add those into the systems just for efficiency purposes and anything to, so that you're not wasting or throwing away. So it's still something I'm interested in, but I know that I can professionally buy systems that are already put together and already pre-built that they'll help you build and dial in and get processed, and those are probably a better way to go, especially if you want to make sure everything is clean and safe for commercial use. The only problem is those, you have to count on those companies to continue to survive and to be able to sell you parts and then maybe or find alternate parts or anything like that. So this here is where I decide to turn it on and test it for the final time. It's actually finally working a little better. I did find out that there was a little bit of a leak still, but I found a way around that, even though, let's see, even though it felt a little annoying at first, but I did figure out a way to get around it. Let's see if I got a good picture of that. I believe I do. Trying a little music this episode. I don't know how well it's going to come through. I believe it's at least going to be audible, and we'll have something break up the boringness of the in-between parts here. But this is actually still very exciting because I'm so close to having a much bigger system. I mean, look at all that grow space, all those grow cups along the back, along the PVC pipe and all those holes, and then all the way around to the two that are on that short piece that where the water empties out. And then I have all this grow space here with the clay pebbles, which will be similar to what I did on the previous system. I can grow lettuce and spinach and things like that. So this is going to be interesting to see if I can get enough fish in there comfortably that can actually produce this entire grow section, because I think I'm running into a shortage of nutrition on the 10-gallon setup, because I don't know, maybe there's something else going on there. And it seems like lettuce grows no problem. but I can't get much else to grow. The mint went wild, and I'll show some more pictures of that next week. But I'm not gonna make that mistake again and grow mint there next to anything, because it just takes all the nutrients. That's one difference about aquaponics, is that you're only getting nutrients out of what the fish are putting in. So it's different than, say, out in your yard, where the soil has all sorts of nutrients in it already that the roots can root out to and find and gather up in other ways. So it's not waiting for someone to come by and fertilize it. And then you also have the natural fertilization of all the local wildlife. So there's a difference there as well. But so you have to look at it like you get what you put in. And with the aquaponics, the only plants that can survive are the ones that have enough nutrients from the amount of fish that you have. So I can very easily make a system that has way too much grow space and not enough space for fish, and that's going to be a big no-no. So as you can see, it's not a big rush of water. It's just a nice even flow. The small leak that I did find was like, oh man, I don't think it's that bad. I can just leave it. And so I left it alone for a while, and it still sort of seeped into the wood next to it, and so I ended up finding a workaround. Oh, hey, actually, I wanted to, let's see. Yes, here it is. So I taped, you can see where I taped the pieces of plastic on both sides of the PVC pipe here, just so that none of the water leaking out would touch the wood. Oh, there's a better picture of it there. Okay, so this is a picture of a couple of just barrels that I rinsed out. And I put them under my carport at the very edge, and this is where I started collecting rainwater. And I thought, hey, this would be a good way to fill up that 55-gallon fish tank, and the fish will make the water dirty, and then the plants will clean the water, and then they can use it no problem. And I thought, okay, this is a good idea. And I actually dumped a bunch into my fish tank, and then I ended up finding these little, I haven't put any fish in there yet, just so we're aware. But I found these little worm-like guys floating around the water and sort of thrashing around, almost like they were drowning. But you'll see a little video here. See, they're very hard to see. One of my videos here actually looks better. See, that one you can kind of see it. They say they're a parasite of some kind. So I'm guessing it came from the rainwater. There it is. You can see that right up in here. You'll see it. And I ended up buying some chemical that actually kills it and is safe for fish and everything else. So that is pretty gross, though. These little worms. There were a bunch of them. And this is actually a picture of the grow light that I purchased from UGrow in Bloomington. And the gentleman there, this was not actually a sale item. He said he bought this and was going to use it for personal use, and ended up not working or not fitting. And so he actually kind of bent up the edges a little bit, but that's not too bad. But he gave this to me for $20. I mean, I can't complain too much on that. So I mean, it works fine. And it's a 2-foot long grow light. So this is what I'm going to suspend up over the top of my my new upgraded system here. You can see behind me. It's gonna go right up there on the ceiling. So I'm gonna make it in such a way that I can raise and lower it if I need to. This will be the last little piece that goes until I start to add the fish and the plants and everything. So it's pretty exciting. And it's actually almost complete, so I can't believe it. But until next time, guys, I appreciate your watching the episode, and I will be giving, let's see, more insight into why why I'm doing this and what my future ideas and plans are, because it's not only farming, it's just everything that has to do with farming and everything that is connected to the process of making our own food and our own medicines, food, and all sorts of other products that we can do ourselves. So let's see what we can do next week when we go back to the setup that's actually working. We'll give you a quick update on that, and then I'm hopefully going to see where my mom's at on her raised beds. Check that out. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Check out my locals.com. You'll see that in the link. Let's see if I have any more pictures here. I don't think I do. Oh, that was it. Thank you for watching, everybody.